The meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the December 1st, 2022 meeting of the City of Raleigh Appearance Commission. My name is Chris Roberts and I am chair of the commission. The Raleigh Appearance Commission is a public body appointed by the City Council that exercises both advisory and quasi-judicial functions. The Appearance Commission's responsibilities relate to zoning and other land use matters, as well as the visual quality and aesthetic characteristics of the city. Today's agenda includes requests for design alternates from the city's Unified Development Ordinance, and when hearing requests for design alternates, the Appearance Commission sits as a quasi-judicial body and conducts an evidentiary hearing on the request. That means it is like a court hearing. State law sets specific procedures and rules concerning how this commission must make its decisions. When hearing quasi-judicial matters, the Appearance Commission has 9 regular members and 6 alternate members. The standard the applicant must meet to be granted their request is set forth in the UDO. The commission hears and considers evidence presented at the hearing and applies the standard when making its decision. The commission must base its decisions upon competent material and substantial evidence presented at the hearing. The meeting is open to the public and everyone is welcome to watch. However, participation in the evidentiary hearing is limited. Parties have rights to participate fully. Parties may present evidence, call witnesses, and make legal arguments. Witnesses may testify as to facts as to which they are competent to testify, so long as those facts relate to the legal standards. In addition, lay or non-expert witness testimony is limited to facts, not personal preference or opinions. For certain topics, the commission needs to hear opinion testimony from expert witnesses. These topics include projections about impacts on property values and projections about impacts on traffic safety. We will now conduct the evidentiary hearings on today's agenda, and for the first case, I need to recuse myself, so I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chair Adam Walters.
Thank you, Chair Roberts. We will now open the evidentiary.
I'd like to disclose ex parte communication with the developer. I met with them back in September.
Okay.
At a high level, talking about multiple sites and nothing specific pertaining to the specific design alternate or their site plans for that site. But
Okay. Could we ask the applicant?
Yep, and what I would also ask Will first is that can you be a fair and impartial decision maker?
yes,
Okay, yeah, and I would ask if there's any objection from any board members or the applicant.
Okay. Is there any objection to have Will hear this case from the board?
no.
Applicant? Good. No? Okay. Great. Well, then let's proceed. Casey Evans will introduce this hearing. Before you start, can you please confirm that you have been sworn in for today's hearing, which you have not?
No.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please proceed.
Good evening. The subject property here is located on the north side of East Lenoir Street, between South Wilmington Street and South Blunt Street, with addresses of 521 and 529 South Wilmington Street and 108 and 112 Stronach Alley. The property is zoned downtown mixed use, 20 stories, with a shopfront frontage and conditional use. The Wilmington Mixed Use Project is a proposed mixed-use building, including structured parking and commercial and residential uses. The proposed building extends the length of Lenoir Street and has frontage along Wilmington Street, Blunt Street, and Stronach Alley. The applicant is requesting 3 design alternates. The first has to do with reducing transparency or ground story transparency facing South Wilmington Street. The next has to do with reducing the ground story transparency facing South Blunt Street, as well as a design alternate for relief from the cross-access requirements. Transparency is required for each side of the building facing a public street, and mixed-use buildings in the DX district are required to have a minimum of 66% transparency on the ground story. And 50% of that required transparency must be located between 3 and 8 feet. You have 2 findings related to the transparency or regulations that must be satisfied in order to grant design alternates for transparency. And there are 4 findings that must be satisfied in order to grant the requested design alternate for cross-access. And we have these both sets available here for your reference. So I'm available if you have any questions. I'm going to invite Kevin Kidd with our transportation team up to share any remarks that he might have.
Thank you, Casey. Kevin,
Afternoon.
could you introduce yourself?
Kevin Kidd, Transportation Department.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be truth, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please proceed.
So just want to mention I'm here for any questions. Also want to note some appreciation to this developer for working with staff. What they've established in a downtown environment is an internal access for move-in and loading. Now, that is adjacent to the lot where they'd have cross-access, but I just wanted to mention working with staff, showing there can be internal. That's it.
Thank you. The applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of the request. As a reminder, any evidence and argument must focus on the applicable standards.
Good afternoon, Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group. I do have with me today two others who I'd like to have sworn in.
Okay.
Sarah Mobrotten, Project Manager and Designer at LS3P, as well as Jonathan Balderson, Civil Engineer with McAdams.
Okay, great. Come on up and state your name
Sarah Mobrotten with LS3P.
and address.
Address?
Yeah.
434 Fayetteville Street.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Hey there, Jonathan Balderson, 621 Hillsborough Street.
And your relation to the case?
Civil engineer, McAdams.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to begin with a brief orientation to the site. You've seen this outline previously, but what I'd like to highlight here are especially the short frontages along the streets at Wilmington and at South Blunt Street. That's going to come back, and the thing to note is when we will start looking at some elevations for the transparency requests, we'll be looking at the entire side of the building, so this is helpful to understand where some of what you're seeing in the elevation is actually very far off the street. And we'll come back to that, but I just wanted you to see that in this view. And the same view in aerial, just to understand what's there today. So to continue the tour, this is the view from Lenore Street. That's the street there out front, with South Blunt Street there on the right side of the screen. Lenore is the longest frontage that this property has, and by far its opportunity to make the largest impact on the pedestrian realm. So for this project, this frontage has been prioritized. We don't have any requests related to the Lenore frontage, but I wanted you to see this too, because when we start looking at the Wilmington and the Blunt Street frontages, the architectural treatments are continued to the extent possible on those facades, which invites some complications in those locations. This is a view looking southwest. So we have South Blunt Street on the left-hand side of the screen and Stronach's Alley going across the right there. This is another way to see it. So when you see that elevation, when we're looking at transparency, we will be looking at that entire wall, despite some of it being set back from Blunt Street. And here we have the view from Stronach's Alley, which is down front in this slide, with Wilmington Street on the right-hand side. And back to Lenore Street with Wilmington on the left. Here's the same perspective, but from street view. And here, what I'd like to point out in particular are these pilasters that we have. They're the taller ones in the lighter color, but also there are some smaller ones set into those retail entrances. Those are going to be some of the factors that we look at when we turn to the Wilmington and Blunt frontages as well. So here we are in elevation. This is the Lenore Street frontage. As I said, we don't have a request at this location, but I wanted to sort of orient you here. For transparency, there are the two shades of pink here. All of that is transparent, and the difference in the two shades is that the darker purplish color, that is the area between 3 and 8 feet above the finished floor. So we get to our first request, and here we're on Blunt Street. So again, that entire portion that is simply in gray has no transparency on the right-hand side. That is all back behind those other lots that you see there at the corner. So the calculations are focused on the area on the left-hand side of the screen. And here, the request is quite minimal. The requirement is to have 317 square feet of transparency between 3 and 8 feet above the finished floor, and the request is for a 30 square foot design alternate to that number, so a 30 square foot reduction. And the reason for that on this facade is simply that in carrying around that rhythm, that architectural treatment on the exterior, it just fits a little bit differently here on this shortened facade. I will note that I intend to ask Sarah Mabrotten to come up and walk you through a little bit these architectural treatments, but given that the requests are similar on the different facades, I want to go through those first. So here we have the Wilmington Street facade. Again, that section on the left is behind other lots. But on the right-hand side, it is the more complicated facade because this is where the loading dock entrance is. And so much less transparency. I will note that what you see in blue, that is spandrel glass. So attempting to recreate that transparency where it doesn't technically exist. And here the request is much larger. We're looking for the ground floor transparency, a 725 square foot design alternate to the 982 square foot requirement. And for that area that's in the darker pink, between 3 and 8 feet above the finished floor, the request is for a 355 square foot design alternate to the 491 square foot requirement. And with that, I will turn it over to Sarah Mabrotten to talk through the architectural treatments here.
I was just going to go back to the 3D views. It's a little bit easier to talk about the materials. So looking at this view here from southwest Lenoir, you can see that there's a thin brick veneer, which is the primary facade. At the retail storefront areas, we have a metal panel and glass, and that was intended to break up the rhythm of the facade at the pedestrian level. On Wilmington Street, as Molly mentioned, we did continue spandrel glass at the loading area in order to try to replicate that glazing. But as Kevin mentioned, we have taken the loading and trash fully internal to the building, so that did take up quite a large footprint. And we do have the floor plan in here later that I can show you.
I realize I should have noted earlier, I'd like to request that our application materials and slides be admitted to the record. And now that you've heard about what the architectural treatments are to attempt to create that visual interest, especially here at the street level, I just wanted to kind of note the standards for this one. The intent of the provision is to create that visual interest for pedestrians and for drivers as well. And I think Sarah's done a good job of explaining how that's been done to the extent possible here and explain the methods for that. So with that, I will move on to the cross-access request. I think this actually is a good starting place to transition here. The blue is the retail. Lenoir Street is down at the bottom of the screen. And the cross-access would be up, well, Kevin mentioned a particular parcel that would have cross-access. In fact, the requirement could theoretically apply to others. However, here you see Stronach's Alley there at the top, and that alley serves every other parcel on this block except for one. So that really provides all the access necessary in this downtown location. The one parcel that doesn't have direct access is the parcel on Wilmington Street, immediately next to this parcel. That one is surrounded on two sides by parcels that are not part of this project and that block its access to Stronach's Alley. So the request here is to not have the cross-access provided on this property, which in our view makes sense for a couple of reasons. One, the best outcome for that parcel is actually to have access to that alley and avoid the access on the higher speed, higher traffic Wilmington Street. And to do that, the most direct way is obviously to go directly to the north or even through that parcel that's to the east. To come through this parcel would require either access onto Wilmington through that loading dock or to sort of wander through the block before it got back up to Stronach's Alley. So this parcel doesn't offer the best solution for the access for that parcel. As you heard, there was a lot of effort made. I know that you hear over and over again how difficult it is to not have a loading dock with a backing motion in the downtown area, and this applicant worked extremely hard to avoid that situation here, and part of that was creating this loading dock area at that location. So that is how they're able to make that loading work. I will also note that the zoning for this parcel doesn't allow loading dock access on Stronach's Alley. So it had to be on one of these major streets. And so there were just multiple constraints here for that request. I did want to walk very quickly through those design alternate standards. You do have the application materials in the record, so you have all of that. I won't belabor it. However, some of the important points are simply that the idea is to maximize safety. Certainly we feel that Stronach's Alley achieves that for most of the other parcels on this block, and that this site does not offer the safest access for that one parcel that does not have access to the alley. Additionally, there are no conflicting roadway construction projects here. And in particular, standard number 4 for this design alternate gives a series of possible reasons that this is needed. And some of these do indirectly acknowledge the problems that occur downtown. For example, compliance would not meaningfully improve connectivity. Certainly true as your blocks get smaller at locations like this one. But in particular, the burden of compliance is simply not reasonable given the size of the site or the intensity of development. And obviously that equation starts to tip in a certain direction in these downtown sites, and it's certainly true here that there are just many, many demands on that ground floor to serve a lot of purposes on a very tight and constrained site. And that is how we feel that these standards have been met. Our entire team is available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak? Doesn't look like it. Molly, you don't have any closing statements or anything, do you?
I suppose I've said it before, only that we've sort of walked through how we meet the standards and feel that this is an appropriate location for this request, and that we've certainly worked very hard to minimize our requests.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commission at this point?
I got a couple.
Go ahead.
This is, I think, mostly for the applicant. Do you have any sense of just mathematically how much additional transparency you're providing along Lenore Street?
Additional to what?
Like
Beyond
above
the required 50 and 66% along Lenore.
Oh, I can't read it.
There is additional transparency on Lenore. Let's see if I can read the chart. It's required, I think, is 2,700 and some, and provided is, oh, thank you. 2,709 square feet is required, and we've provided 2,868. And then between the 3 and 8 feet required is 1,354, and we've provided 1,384.
Can I just add to that question? If you added the spandrel glass in on the Wilmington side as transparency, even though it's not transparent, do you have any idea if you met or exceeded the transparency requirement?
Don't know that calculation offhand. Certainly we'd be looking into a loading dock and fire pump room.
No, I appreciate the spandrel glass. I thought that was it looked good on the 3D rendering, especially. I think I saw in the packet that there were some rezoning items that dictated some of the design on the side, on the back side of the site, essentially the Stronach Alley side. Did the paneling that was used, was that dictated through the rezoning, or can you just talk about some of those rezoning conditions a little bit?
I do have the conditions with me. I believe we only referenced the fact that the zoning prohibits that loading dock entrance
Loading dock
there.
being back there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think the location was on that back side, so that makes sense that was the zoning condition you're talking about. Kevin, this is maybe a question for you. Stronach Alley is a city-maintained alley. Is it also city-owned, or is it a private alley?
Molly on this one too. So it is an alley that's not maintained by the city, not an identified right-of-way. So the city's not maintaining it.
Okay.
Is that your question? Is it going to be maintained?
No, well, you answered my question, which is,
Gotcha.
So go ahead, and we're, I think, thinking about the same stuff. Knowing that it's not city maintained, not city owned,
That's correct.
there's really no plans that the city has for that.
No, and quite honestly, it's protected, for lack of a better term, through historical perspective, if I recall correctly, from the rezoning. So there's very specific items they're not supposed to do the alley. It's largely supposed to maintain where it is now. So,
yeah, it's a very tight alley.
Very.
Now, understanding it's not the city's, then that, that is what it is. I just was wondering if there were any improvements or anything planned for that alley, just based off of it being utilized as an entrance to the
in
deck.
transparency, there has been discussions with the design team on the potential impacts to that through construction, potential to resurface within the same footprint. And, you spoke to how narrow it is.
It's one
So-
way, yeah.
Yeah, certainly one way is the way to do it. Now, the alley does serve multiple frontages,
Right.
so going through those dynamics is something we're still looking at in the review.
This isn't totally relevant to this. I'm just, and I think the cross-access element of this makes total sense. As far as the design alternate, it is an extremely tight turn as well to get onto that alley and or off onto those one-way streets.
Sure. And, well, and it's currently, if I recall correctly, largely served by parking lots currently. However, long-term, reducing those cuts along Wilmington would be key, where it would be focused to more of an alley scenario, where the vehicles are going through one side to get across.
And this might be the right question for you, but yes, there's a historical context for Stronach Alley, but there's not actually any formal designation or historic protection for that alleyway other than some rezoning related items that entered in, correct?
I may have to defer
Yeah.
to planning on that.
Or the applicant or whoever.
Or, well,
I'm not aware of direct protection on the alley itself. The Pope House there across the alley is a protected property.
Who owns the alley?
That is, I don't have the answer to that. It is not this owner.
Yeah.
We have someone who can answer that.
So we did a lot of research on the alley and where the property lines are. So which way do I go to the site plan? Can I zoom on this? Okay, this works. Or maybe, yeah. So the properties that all front the alley overlap the alley. So it's a private right-of-way / easement is what the alley is. So we researched this back to 1900 as the earliest document we could find, and haven't been able to discover anything on ownership other than it's the property owners with an easement over those properties.
So the property line's in the middle of the road,
Correct.
and
Yep.
there's no. Is there anything documenting maintenance requirements or shared maintenance on that easement? Is there easement language?
There's easement granting access to the properties that are on it.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any maintenance agreement.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Kevin, can I just ask one quick question? I don't know how relevant it is. The only other example of this in Raleigh that I know is Rosengarten. Is that the same situation?
I'd have to look at it. I'd want to say that shows up in plating, just speculating, as it looks like alley, but it's more of an easement. Generally speaking, the city doesn't maintain control alleys. There is a small portion that do, but very rare. But in the context of Rosengarten, that's more single family.
It
if
is
I
single
recall.
family, yeah. But they just resurfaced that.
So, but I'm speculating to some degree.
Yeah. Is there ever a scenario where the city could take maintenance, have a maintenance agreement, or take some kind of ownership or over that?
The problem is the underlying properties
Mm-hmm.
and not having that right away.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Not foreseen. And also part of the zoning case was just the historical context of the surrounding properties.
Mm-hmm.
So furthermore, city streets, there's a certain width that we couldn't achieve there. So
Yeah.
the right answer would be, I don't foresee that.
Okay. Thank you.
One question for the applicant. The other parcels that are part of this block, I believe, are predominantly surface parking at present time. Are you aware of any planned development, existing development for those properties?
I'm sorry, you're talking about the properties on the same block that are not part of,
So if I'm standing on Blunt Street, right, part of this is that the lack of, or the reduced transparency both on Wilmington and on Blunt is created because, I assume, because there are no buildings between those streets and
no, so,
your proposed building.
so the calculation is based only on those portions of the facade not behind a different lot.
Okay.
And really the only, so the Blunt Street transparency makes sense. It's really just, you put it pretty much as many windows as you could and kept the repetition. And the Wilmington Street on the north side, that's a functional need because of something happening internally.
Right, so that pertains to the loading dock.
The loading dock,
Let's go
yeah,
to-
okay.
There we go.
Oh, yeah,
So-
there it is,
Right,
yeah.
so when you look at the transparency that
that
does
make
exist
sense?
here, it's along that retail section, the blue.
So on the right side is the only, that little section.
Where there are 3 liters that are arrows that are going out from the comment.
No, none of that is required. Just where the blue is all the way on Blunt Street.
Yeah, so we're talking about this section right
Yeah.
here, right? And we're talking about this section
Yeah.
right here,
Okay.
right? And then I assume the choice of paneling materials on that top of the T or the bottom of the upside down T is intended to just blend in and be nondescript from as the rest of the properties would develop, correct?
Oh, on the, I guess, the sort of
The
facade
side that wouldn't be
behind.
visible once the other properties develop.
That's exactly right. They're firewalls.
Okay.
Was there any there could still be, but any thought process around, any potential way to potentially kind of lean into the history of Stronach Alley in some way related to this site?
Yeah, so during the rezoning process, there was some discussion of that. And so the zoning requires, I think you heard mentioned, certain materials, building material requirements on that side, as well as pedestrian access. That was as far as it went. There isn't really something to be preserved or.
And were the building materials prescribed there intended for it to be, again, kind of not, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
Well, it's a quality provision. It doesn't pertain to style or anything like that.
Yeah, I think the only thing that, in seeing the application that it made me think about would be, is there a way on that backside on one of the blank walls there maybe to, do a mural or something that speaks to the history of Stronach Alley as a means to really tie into the history there with this site.
So those walls are zero lot line walls.
Mhm.
And so there would be no expectation that they would be visible for any particular period of time.
Understood. Oh, I'm talking about on the actual alley where there's
the
the
facade
easement.
itself.
Yeah.
Let's go back and look at that. So this is the facade you're thinking of? Is there, can you talk about what these materials are and what's going on there?
So we do have different colors of precast as well as the thin brick veneer. And I was trying to remember if there's a zoning condition that had a maximum amount of glazing, or we actually thought we were required to have more solid on that facade, but I don't recall exactly the language. Yep, sorry.
So the zoning requires that this facade be 50% brick or concrete masonry and a maximum 50% glass and metal.
And so we have limited locations to put our generator, again, on the zero lot line, allowing venting. So the generator room is on that wall. So there will be louvers facing that way. We have talked about some locations for potential murals on other facades. That is still in design. So.
Yeah, and it could theoretically be a way to, get to putting a mural here gets to transparency in another place and kind of a transference there. But, I'm not pushing that for this. I'm more just a comment on, I think that could be a really meaningful way to, speak to the history there with this site and help to create something there that's not existing.
I think it could certainly be considered. I don't know that it goes to the standard of the visual interest of the street-facing facade at issue.
Anybody else have any other questions at this time?
I'm just wondering if we can get a little bit more clarity on the architectural features along this facade. I'm just having a hard time.
Of
I
which
don't really
street?
see a, I don't really see a real blow up of that area. I don't know if we can blow it up a little bit on the.
On
those
Wilmington
two-
or
Yeah, on
Stronach?
Wilmington.
On
both.
Wilmington.
Wilmington.
Yeah.
Primarily.
Yeah, it was,
Oh, it's the Wilmington side? Let's see.
that one rendering
Oops.
shows just the intersection view.
I mean, I think I know what's going on, but
No.
yeah, just a little.
We'll get there. I think that's the best rendering. Yeah.
It's hard to see.
Would you like me to go to the elevation? Would that be easier?
That's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, wrong way.
I don't know if we can just
There we
zoom in
go.
a little bit or not, but
Can we zoom on this?
is there a way to zoom in on there on the PDF?
Is there a way to zoom? So you can see this stippled glass here, that is the spandrel glass. And this is the small portion of retail that's along Wilmington Street, which is transparent.
And then can you kind of show the plan and how that relates to the plan there?
Certainly. So the large overhead door you saw is here. We have spandrel glass here by the fire pump room, spandrel glass at the loading dock. We have an egress corridor from the tower above, and then, which does have glass, and then and then retail, transparent glazing.
Thank you.
Anything else at this time? I just have one quick question for Kevin. Kevin, in your expert opinion, do you have any concerns regarding safety or operational issues with with Stronach's Alley side of this?
No, I don't have any safety concerns. I would want to be able to evaluate if it needs to be paved after the fact with whatever activity comes with.
Mm-hmm.
But I do not have any concerns safety-wise with the
Okay.
proposal.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hearing no additional questions or presentation of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. As a reminder, this commission is tasked with deciding if, based on the evidence presented, this proposal meets the applicable standards. Casey, could you bring up the applicable standards? This decision cannot be based on the personal preference of commission members. Rather, it is based on standards and evidence. If based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. We could start with transparency. So really, does anybody want to start it off? Have any comments or anything?
Honestly, I think all three of the requests are pretty reasonable, and that in all cases they've provided some additional treatments, architectural elements, et cetera, to justify why it's reasonable. I think the cross-access, it doesn't make a ton of sense to enforce in this case. So I think for all of the above, that it's reasonable.
Yeah. I'd certainly agree. Transparency seems easy to me. It seems like with the spandrel glass and the architectural elements, it's kind of an open and shut case on the transparency, especially because they did internal movement of the loading dock, which is a great precedent for us in some future cases. So, yeah, any other comments about transparency? I think I agree with you, Will, on the cross-access. Can you bring those up, Casey? Sorry, just get your steps in. I am concerned about the Stronach's Alley. It's a pretty unique case, and I don't know. I mean, I don't have any suggestions, but I think I just want to kind of talk it through with everybody and see if anybody has any ideas. There's not. I don't really know how to consider it when there's no city maintenance and no right of way. And
I don't know what authority either we or the city would have to request anything
Outside of our purview, but certainly if there were a mirror twin on this on the north side, also using the alley, it would probably be challenging.
Yeah, and yeah, so I don't really see any opportunities for cross-access to address that, unless anybody else does.
I think my other comment, just generally speaking, is because there are surface parking lots and it is extremely highly visible and will be when it's built, it could be for a while, to really seriously think about ways that those sides of the building that will be visible until the development occurs, for those to be treated or thought of in some type of way to soften them. I think it's in the benefit of the development and certainly performance of the product. And then to my comments there about Stronach Alley, if there's a way to meaningfully kind of speak to the history there, and there's not a lot there's really nothing on Stronach's Alley other than the relocated Pope House, but I think that could go a long way to just make that development feel good in that context.
Well said. Any other comments? Anyone want to make a motion?
For all three, I'll motion to approve.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
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 The motion passes. The commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with a right to such notice following the adoption of the decision. Thank you. We're going to move on to the next case, and I'm going to hand it back to Chair Roberts at this time.
Thank you, Vice Chair Walters. All right, we will now open the evidentiary hearing for item DA-21-2022 on today's agenda. And Casey, again, will introduce this hearing. Thanks, Casey.
Okay, we have DA-21-2022. This subject property is located at the southwest corner of Smallwood Drive and Woodburn Road and has an address of 2016 Cameron Street. The property is zoned commercial mixed use, 7 stories, with an urban limited frontage and conditional use. The Oberlin Hotel project is a proposed general building including structured parking, developed for a proposed hotel use. The project involves demolition of a portion of the existing building on that property and parking lot to make way for the proposed hotel. The applicant is requesting 3 design alternates. The first is a design alternate to reduce the distance between the 2 driveways on Smallwood Drive. And there are 4 findings related to that request that have to be satisfied. The second design alternate is to reduce the distance between a driveway on Smallwood Drive and the intersection of Smallwood Drive and Woodburn Road. And the third request is to reduce the distance between the driveway on Woodburn Road and the intersection of Woodburn Road and Cameron Street. There are 6 design alternate findings that must be satisfied in order to grant the design alternate requests related to the driveway distance to intersection. And again, we have these findings here available for your reference while you deliberate, and I'm available for questions. And again, I'll invite Kevin up to share any remarks that he has.
One of the key things I want to note is that the exhibits before you today have not been fully reviewed by staff. Site's been through 2 reviews currently. What you have before you today differs from parking deck operation and building shape. So just wanted to mention that. Outside of that,
Could you
available for any questions.
could you state that again?
Sure.
Just I
The
want to be
exhibits
clear.
before you today have not been fully reviewed by staff. There's several trades that would need to look at it for various needs.
Could you clarify what you have reviewed and what you have not?
The parking deck is a different layout than what we had seen previously. The operation of the parking deck, from what I've been able to digest so far, is different, and the shape of the building has changed to some degree with changes to the parking. Whereas, let's see. Don't mind me. Oh. So what will be presented is what you see here. What was previously available was full access driveway, interior, a right in, right out with, I think, 8 spaces. So,
Are you talking about on Smallwood?
yes, that's correct.
Can you zoom in there? I can't really see what
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not now.
Okay, I don't have the exhibit from the previous plans, but if you look here, can you see the cursor?
Yep.
Those spaces were not previously there. It was previously two-way and a grade-separated basement deck. So
Okay.
I just wanted to make that aware and be available for any questions.
Thank you. Sorry.
All right, the applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of the request. As a reminder, any evidence and argument must focus on the applicable standards. And I would ask, before you begin, please state your name for the record, your name, address in relation to the case, and I'll swear in any non-attorneys.
David Boyette with McAdams, 621 Hillsborough Street. I'm the civil engineer for the project.
And David, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening and thank you, members of the Appearance Commission. My name is Samuel Morris. I'm a lawyer with Longleaf Law Partners, 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302 here in Raleigh. Here on behalf of the applicant and development group, I'm here tonight with Rodney Cheek from Quality Oil, Paul Mugnana, and Adam Jolly from Regency Centers, and as well we've got David Boyette from McAdams here. Off the top, well, here, let me, Casey, could I ask you to get me back into... So yes, there have been some kind of updates to the plans since the most recent round of staff comments. I believe the most recent version of the ASR show what is a full movement driveway along Smallwood, and kind of through back and forth heading into this hearing. Staff had concerns about the full movement, and that through some conversations and meetings that has been sort of negotiated down, or I shouldn't say negotiated, but just in response to safety concerns, the plans have been amended and kind of tapered that down to what is a right out only alternative. That's the primary difference of the plans that are, kind of what we would call the most recent set of ASR submittals and what is being presented before you tonight. We also, of course, have like narrative conditions written that can basically just say that full movement driveway will be right in, right out. We're happy to obviously submit those along with these kind of updated plans to make sure that that's clear. Any kind of changes to the plan that resulted from that shift from the full movement to the right out only, I'd have probably David speak to those, and if they have any impact on the design alternates being requested today. Obviously, as we'll get into, these are all traffic related and driveway spacing related. So any other changes other than the full movement to right out only, I'd have David speak to those and whether or not they affect the design alternate request. So just it looks like it is part of this presentation that we've amended, but Catherine, can I hand you just updated plans we've got?
Yeah, so let me make sure I'm clear too. So is this what's in board docs now?
It's what's on the presentation.
Board docs has a right in, right out. Only.
Board docs is not
It has sort of evolved.
Okay, so
as you can.
this is the first time this is being submitted in conjunction with this design alternate request. So what we'll need to do is submit it with the clerk so that you can mark it and that you can clarify that this is your current site plan. What I'm trying to figure out is a way for the board to see it, because it looks like, you have more than one copy for everybody. Okay, So what we'll do is I'll give a copy to you to mark as an exhibit, and then you can submit a copy to each of the board members. Is that what you want to do?
That is what we would like to do, yes.
And is this your most recent, or this is the application or the site plan that goes with the application that you want to have
Correct.
considered? Okay.
Yes, and we do have narrative conditions to go along with that, which effectively reflect the changes that have been made.
I'm going to give these to the clerk to mark one and then pass them out.
Do you have copies of those conditions for each of us?
Yes,
too?
apologize, I have that. And it just reflects what's shown on the plan effectively. So the plan itself will be part of it. This is just to clarify.
Okay, and these are simple enough, we can read them into the record too. Once, you tell me when you're ready to get to this point.
Okay.
Can I hold on to this?
Absolutely.
Thanks. And is this being submitted into the record as well, or is just for me to look at in the event that they want to impose
It depends.
conditions?
I mean, I feel like there's a possibility that conditions will be considered later on in the hearing. So maybe we want to hold off before formally submitting and just kind of,
This is for reference for when they get to.
I'd say so. It's shown on the plan, which we're submitting as part of the request. The conditions essentially just say it is right in, right out. We'll provide curbs, and we'll provide a change in material along that driveway.
Okay.
We appreciate your patience and understanding that as we've headed into this hearing, as you can tell, that plans have changed, and we've tried to make some adoptions and changes to the plans to respond to staff concerns regarding safety and these design alternate requests. And all of this, just to reiterate, is the goal to give you the most recent and the best version of the plan here at the hearing. So, thank you. And just to clarify, Catherine, I'd like to request that our application and presentation, as well as the materials just submitted, be admitted into the record. Thank you. So we are here today requesting 3 design alternates related to driveway spacing to allow for the development of a 7-story hotel located at the corner of Smallwood and Woodburn in the Village District. As Casey just outlined, the first is a 51-foot design alternate to the 200-foot driveway-to-driveway spacing requirement along Smallwood. The second request is a 17.7-foot alternate from the 150-foot driveway to intersection spacing requirement. And the final request is a 33.4-foot alternate from the 150-foot driveway to intersection requirement, and that's along Woodburn in relation to the Woodburn-Cameron intersection. And we'll show you these all in more detail in a moment. Here's an aerial view of the site, which is, of course, located at the center of the Village District. That larger building on the left is the Harris Teeter. The entire block is actually a single parcel, and the smaller box, kind of highlighted in red on the top right, is the area where the what is called the Oberlin Hotel is going to be located. And that's the kind of current location of the former KFC and associated surface parking at the Village District. Here's an aerial of the zoning on the property and the surrounding area. This specific corner of 2016 Cameron Street was rezoned in the last year to allow 7 stories, placed in urban limited frontage, pushing the building up to the street, specifically with this development in mind. Here is the version of the plan that you have in front of you. And the design alternate requests themselves have not changed with regard to the actual number of feet. Like I said, primarily the only change that has been made is converting what it was a full movement driveway along Smallwood into a right out only along Smallwood, along with what sounds like some minor associated changes with the site plan. And just to clarify, as you heard, design alternate request number 1 is here. Design alternate request number 2 is here, and design alternate request number 3 is here. Here is the proposed building elevation on Woodburn. So here's kind of, right here is the corner of Woodburn and Smallwood. You can see there's this kind of classic hotel corner sign. And what you see over here is the drop-off area. And so the proposed driveway along Woodburn will be kind of over here, accessing that drop-off area along Woodburn. Moving to the other side of the block to reorient you, here's that corner again right there. This is looking along Smallwood Drive, the existing driveway, kind of serving Medlin Davis and the rear portions of what was the K&W. That's kind of right there. Of course, the new proposed driveway will be, located approximately there. So here's a street level view of the current conditions on the site. This is, of course, looking at the property from the intersection of Smallwood and Woodburn. This gives you an idea of the grade, which is an aspect of this case. As you can see, the grade kind of shifts down this way, and of course along the property kind of shifts down towards Smallwood that way, and results in what you'll see shortly essentially is that kind of basement level parking that is separated from the main parking deck, and that is a result of the grade that's existing down here, essentially where that basement level parking, and then kind of back on this portion of the property where it's much higher, where the parking deck itself will be located, which is largely driving the need for the additional driveway, which is kind of driving this entire request. Here's another angle looking along Smallwood. Again, there's Medlin Davis over here, the existing driveway, and there's that intersection. And just to visualize that, that new driveway is going to be somewhere, roughly in the middle of that, as shown on your plan. Moving kind of to the other side of the block, this is the corner of Woodburn and Cameron Street. Of course, looking down towards that intersection that we were just at. There's an existing driveway here that's actually quite close to the intersection. And as you move down the block towards Smallwood, there's of course another curb cut there that's also located pretty close to that intersection. And the plan, of course, is to remove both of those and replace them with one that's closer to here in the middle. And so just to kind of summarize that real quickly, the plan is roughly to get rid of those two and put a new one, there. This one will stay. And then there's right out only here. That's the overall connectivity access plan. So moving into our first request. Oh, I'm sorry, the numbers are incorrect, but I can pop back to the original one. It's a 51-foot design alternate request from the requirements of UDO section 8.5.5A, which of course impose that 200-foot requirement. And the plans include 149 feet of spacing, which is 51 feet short. And that highlighted area shows you exactly where this request pertains to. And there's a slightly closer version showing that section. Of course, the right in, right out located here. And as you can see on the plan, that this is actually an ingress only here. So this, like I mentioned earlier, this basement level parking is separated from the parking deck over here, and that's because of the grade kind of down on this portion of the property. Going back to the rezoning, I mean, maintaining as much parking on the property has been a major concern from the entire development process. And I think that this kind of adding this extra basement level, kind of a safe area for patrons to park is a response of the developers to those requests and to is thinking it will provide a benefit to this development and to the block as a whole. But in order to do that, this kind of this option to exit onto Smallwood is considered extremely important in order to make this basement level parking area happen. Is just to bring you back again, the one we're talking about here is essentially the kind of spacing along there, that instead of a full 200 feet, you're getting 149 along that section. Again, there's that kind of same section we're talking about there. So with regards to this first request, which will be very similar to the second request, kind of on the other side of that driveway, but we will just kind of walk through these quickly, that we do think that on the whole, our request is consistent with the site access regulations, which seek to ensure that developments provide safe and sufficient, access points for ingress and egress to a development. When you look at this property right now and think that we're adding a 7-story hotel, and the only real new driveway we're adding is a right out only onto Smallwood to provide some relief to what will otherwise kind of end up being a pretty congested rear access area. That's, again, that driveway that kind of currently serves Medlin Davis and the back of house of many of the existing buildings. So kind of in light of the size and scope of the development, we think that just adding the one right out is generally consistent with the intent of these requirements. And also keeping in mind that the spacing between the existing driveway and the Smallwood-Woodburn intersection is about 280 feet. So if you're going to put anything there, you kind of have to strike a compromise. And we think the location and having it be a fairly narrow right out only that's located right about the 50% mark, kind of reaching substantial compliance with the spacing requirements on each side. And as we'll go to the next one, which is about 130 and change, where the requirement would be 150. And here providing about 150 where it would be 200, trying to, again, reach substantial compliance on each side. We do not think that it will increase traffic congestion because it will, again, provide a safe way for vehicles to exit that basement level parking in a way that takes pressure off that rear entrance and exit that, again, is serving other portions of the property and development, but is the primary or one of the main ways to access the parking deck. And that providing a right out only allows cars essentially obviously exiting that parking deck to quickly and safely exit without having to go back out and around the rear of the building. We also do not think that it will compromise safety because, again, it's located nearly 150 feet from the existing driveway. There's, of course, driveways, that prior to the current UDO that are much closer than that, and that, it is possible to operate safely with 150 feet of spacing, particularly where, again, we're providing and offering curb treatment and a change in color or type of material along the portion of the driveway that traverses that right in, right out, so that anybody walking along Smallwood is made aware of the fact that they're crossing a driveway, and vice versa. The request does not conflict with any approved or built roadway construction projects. We're not aware of any and have not been made aware of any approved or built roadway construction projects that are adjacent to or in the vicinity of this site that would be affected by this request. And finally, we believe the request is reasonable due to the fact that compliance would not meaningfully improve connectivity for kind of the reasons I've just stated. We actually believe that this increases connectivity on this particular lot. If this right out only is essentially cut off, it's just one less way, it just pushes. We're already removing 2 driveways that are located too close to the intersections and replacing that with 1 driveway. So essentially we're going from 3 down to what we'll call 2.5. And so we think that that's, reaching substantial compliance, but also kind of saying, you know, we're going from a surface parking lot to a 7-story hotel. Give us, you know, a half a driveway and exit down here on this basement. We believe is reasonable and, you know, proportionate to the size and scope of the development, and that actually improves connectivity on the site. So design alternate number 2 is a 40.2, or I'm sorry, again, these got changed obviously with the plan, so I'll make clear. Casey's presentation was correct and this intro is correct. This is a 17.7 foot request from the 150 foot spacing requirements. For whatever reason, the driveway to intersection spacing requirements are controlled by the Raleigh Street Design Manual. So it's a slightly different standard than the driveway to driveway spacing requirements. Nonetheless, the Raleigh Street Design Manual requires 150 feet. We've provided 132.3 feet of spacing from that proposed right out only driveway and the Smallwood and Woodburn intersection, as you can see highlighted on this slide. Very similar conditions and basis as the prior request. There's another look. Of course, though, we're looking at kind of this section where, of course, the manual would require 150 feet. We're asking for 132. And, of course, they're kind of looking at here and then having that driveway come out here from what will, of course, be a much larger development on that property. Here's that elevation again. This existing opening, I do believe, reflects what was the full movement. So I imagine that would be ultimately, if the board approves or, you know, conditions that to a right in, right out, or I'm sorry, a right out only, bring that down to one lane, that naturally that kind of opening right there along Smallwood would be smaller in order to accommodate that condition. Again, the basis of this request are very similar to the last. And the Raleigh Street Design Manual's connectivity requirements are also, the intent and goals of those are similar to those of the blocks, lots, and access requirements under the UDO, which is providing safe, sufficient means and pathways of ingress, egress to development sites. We believe that the existing driveway along Smallwood, again, based on the fact that that's already about 280 feet, if there's going to be any kind of connection here, we believe we've kind of tapered it down to a right out only, located as close to the center of the site as possible to try to reach a compromise and reach the intent of those spacing requirements by getting above 130 from the driveway and then getting to almost 150, or I'm sorry, above 130 from the intersection and almost 150 from the driveway. And for the same reasons, we do not think it will increase congestion or compromise safety. It again is providing a way for folks to exit that basement level parking without having to go to the rear of the building, and it will be located over 130 feet from the intersection. Again, there's places all over Raleigh where it's a lot shorter than that. In fact, on this particular site, there are driveways that are a lot closer than that. We'll be removing those and replacing them with what we showed you, the kind of proposed configuration of driveways, which we think overall will improve connectivity and improve the safety on the site. The findings require that that the request not create any additional maintenance responsibilities for the city. I believe the street design manual, you know, it has cross-section and streetscape requirements. I think that's largely the consideration here. We've looked, as far as we're aware, the request does not create any additional maintenance responsibilities for the city. This pertains only to the location of a driveway. It doesn't include like an alteration to the street cross-section or the streetscape in any way that would foreseeably result in increased cost to the city. It's merely a lateral location of a driveway. It also requires that the plan be certified by an engineer. of course, is Mr. David Boyette with McAdams. It will not adversely impact stormwater collection or conveyance. Again, I believe that this is coming out of the Raleigh Street Design Manual, and we do not foresee any way or any foreseeable result that would cause an adverse impact on the collection and conveyance of stormwater on the site. The project will have to establish full compliance with all applicable stormwater regulations as part of the site review and development process. The location of a driveway, again, we don't think has any foreseeable impact on that. And finally, the request is reasonable because the burden of compliance is not reasonable given the size of the site or intensity of the development. This goes back to, again, the fact that we're adding what is a 7-story hotel, what's been zoned and, planned for a 7-story hotel on what's, a former K&W cafeteria and surface parking lot. And so, as you can imagine, that's going to come with increased intensity and the need for connectivity on the site. And we believe that the alterations kind of to some of the undesirable driveway locations and then providing this right out only is what, from the development team's perspective, is reasonable and what is kind of consistent and proportionate to the scope of the development. And again, going from what is kind of currently three full movement driveways to 2 full movement and 1 right out only. And finally, to our third design alternate, this is a 33.4 foot request, same provision, Raleigh Street Design Manual, 150 feet, but this is, of course, in relation to that Cameron Street Woodburn intersection. And just a reminder that the existing driveway is, around here, and then there's another one. It's even actually further down, then there's another one around here. So both of those are technically, non-compliant with this 150-foot requirement. We're getting rid of both of those, and of course putting this new one here, which will provide, this is your classic hotel drop-off loop. They'll be able to access the main parking garage, which you actually can ultimately connect out this way. But again, that's separate from this basement level parking. But what we're talking about here, and that's about 116 feet provided. Here's a little bit of a closer look. Here's that street view. Again, yeah, this is where, less than 100 feet, certainly, existing right there. And so we'll be moving that and then, removing that driveway and moving it further down the block, roughly into this area, And of course, removing that other driveway that you see there. Here's that elevation again, just, the corner being here, no issues along this length, well over 200 feet or well over 150 feet from the intersection. But it's this, this driveway that's going to be accessing the drop-off area in its proximity to the Cameron and Woodburn intersection. Just, kind of where that's going to be located relative to this intersection. And again, although it's on a different side of the block, slightly different portion of the building, again, the kind of bases of the findings and, the submittal are very similar, at least on this side, where we think it is consistent with the street design manual because we're removing those 2, what you call non-compliant driveways, and replacing them with a single full movement driveway that's located 116 and a half feet from Woodburn and Cameron, which is, of course, substantially more than exists today. This will provide a drop-off loop, parking structure access, and will be located closer to the center of the block in a safer and more appropriate location than the existing 2 driveways. The ultimate goal is to provide sufficient access and circulation on this site, but recognizing the kind of practical difficulties of putting a 7-story hotel here. It's going to be one of the more intense developments that the Village District has seen thus far. So just understanding that in relation to kind of the existing conditions. Again, does not increase congestion or compromise safety. We'll be moving the driveway closer to the center of the block and further away from those intersections, kind of decreasing that undesirable queuing into the intersection from a driveway that is located too close to that intersection. Moving it closer to the center of the block, reaching not full compliance, but getting much closer to compliance with the Raleigh Street design. Apologies. And again, we do not think it creates any additional responsibilities for the city, given the fact that we're not changing the streetscape or kind of cross section. Again, just locations of driveways. Has been designed and certified by a professional engineer, and for the same reasons, don't think it's going to impact stormwater conveyance. It's just a location of a driveway. We have to meet all the ordinary stormwater requirements. And on this side, again, we think that the request is reasonable given the size and scope, intensity of what we're proposing to do here. And that strict compliance with the driveway spacing would effectively kind of push the driveway towards the Smallwood-Woodburn intersection in a way that really kind of conflicts with that topography. As you just saw, the site really slopes down towards that intersection. And in order to provide that circular drop-off area and driveway to the parking deck, kind of on the rear portion of the property, it, from a site planning perspective, would conflict kind of with our current drop-off plans, or in what is pretty much the only reasonable location for that drop-off area on that Woodburn side. So accordingly, that is why it's kind of scooched down towards that Woodburn-Cameron intersection to only about, like we said, 116 or so feet. That is what is kind of the most reasonable portion of the block to locate that driveway to access the drop-off and parking deck. So with that, I'll bring up kind of a quick overview summary of our requests and remind you that we do have David Boyette here to answer kind of any more specific questions regarding the site plan. And thank you very much for your patience and your time.
All right. Thanks for the presentation. Do we have anybody from the public here that would wish to speak on the case? All right. Seeing none. Let's go to the commission. Does the commission have any questions either for the applicant or for staff?
I got a couple. Just confirming a couple things. Related to the Woodburn intersection, the plan here shows the white line for the intersection. That would get pulled all the way to the intersection, correct? Whereas now it's like on the other side of that intersection, right?
To answer your question, yes, it will. The stop bar will be pulled closer to the intersection. It's, at least I presume, it's pushed back today because of the location of that driveway, which is far too close to the intersection. So yes, it will get pulled up closer.
Great. Did the circular drive access design change at all between the design that we had previously and the one in front of us today?
The only change to that, and this was a request from transportation staff, we changed the radius right here. This previously came out and then did a number like that. In conversations about this design alternate, staff asked us to kind of soften that radius to keep cars from hitting it, running over it, causing, running over the curb essentially.
Okay.
That's the only change there.
Seems like a good change. And then third question, why is the exit needed from the basement deck onto the road directly versus just having it be in and out via the ramp?
So the issue here is these are separated. So if you come into the parking garage, the deck here, you're going up into the deck here. If you enter here, you're only able to go into the lower level. This is only a one-way because it's only 16 feet wide. It doesn't meet the minimum width for a two-way drive. So you would either have to so the only way to get out of here is to circulate back out through a second driveway.
Okay, and the trash placement there is what restricts it to 16 feet?
It's the trash placement. It's also, the pinch point is really here at that egress stair.
Okay.
Is there some reason you can't design the building so that you can have two-way access from that side?
There are challenges with that, given the placement of this wall and trying to maximize the parking within the deck.
So basically, you lose those four.
You lose those 3 parking spaces on each level of the deck, so a total of 9 spaces. And part of the rezoning of this was don't lose parking in the village district, essentially. So in an effort to get as many parking spaces and preserve as many parking spaces as possible, that's why that was done that way.
But theoretically, if you lost those spaces, then you could do two-way access to the lower parking deck and not have the right out
Theoretically,
onto
that's
Smallwood.
correct.
Okay. And then could you just speak about, well, actually, can you speak about why the trash enclosures like that and the cutouts? It's a really kind of strange corner there that I just wanted to hear from you, from the engineer, about why it's
that's
designed
there.
like that. What's going on there?
So the idea there is that the trash will be picked up actually from this direction, which is why they're kind of notched in the building. That's actually under the parking garage. So, and it has a roll-up door in front of it, so it's screened from public view. And it's angled that way so that it can be serviced from west to east.
And what's behind the trash enclosure? So it notches out on the sidewalk side and kind of in on the parking deck side.
Behind it,
yeah,
on the
like
site or
plan right,
inside the
plan right
garage?
of the trash enclosure.
In this space?
There and then right below it on the plan.
So below it on the plan is just essentially just space within the garage. Outside is an area that the hotel could use for a small seating area or something like that. It's not totally planned at this point, but that's where the concept is going.
Okay, so 2 kind of unprogrammed spaces.
Correct.
One inside, one outside. Thank you.
Can you clarify it was mentioned the grade with the drive access for the hotel drop-off. Is that a grade issue or is that a stacking issue or both?
It really is a grade issue. So Woodburn is falling towards the Smallwood intersection. So pushing that driveway further down Woodburn would increase the slope as you come back up towards the hotel. And we're trying to create a relatively flat area, for drop off, for people wheeling luggage, that kind of thing. You don't want to be on a super steep slope just for that entrance experience.
You don't have any turn templates, I don't think, on that drop-off, but I'm assuming it can accommodate a normal vehicle.
It can accommodate a normal vehicle and even like a van.
And if it can't, they can go into the parking deck.
That's correct. You can circulate all the way through and back out this way. Could you not, if you could not make that turn, but yes.
This basement level parking, it's what, 13, 14 spaces?
I believe it's 14 spaces, yes.
If you can make that turn around that column that's in there to get out. Do you see that as staff parking or do you see that as
We see
whoever?
it primarily as staff parking. I don't know that it would be completely restricted, but that is the intent or the thinking behind it, that it would be primarily for staff.
Are both parking decks open to the public, or are
Yes, they are.
Are they controlled at all?
No.
Any thoughts about the egress for the right out It's just as far as the public safety, walking down the sidewalk, cars coming out. It looks like there may be a little bit of different material used in the sidewalk there.
Yes, so there will be a curb, so there will be curb on either side that will signal to a pedestrian that you're entering a vehicular space. And there'll also be the ADA ramp that will have its own truncated domes. And then we would also, one of the conditions that we had put forth could be to, have a change in material or color across that entire length of the driveway there, across the entire sidewalk, not just where the ADA ramp is, to further signify to a pedestrian that you're entering a vehicular zone.
Sorry, could you say that last part again?
Which,
Just that last part about the materials. Were you saying that it would be wider than what's shown like as the crosswalk?
so we had put forth a condition or a possible condition that we would, instead of just having the truncated dome where the ADA crosswalk is, that we would extend that across the entire length of the sidewalk, so that if you're walking and you're not going to use the ADA ramp, you still see that there's something there.
Gotcha.
So-
But the ADA ramp would still be the same width as what you're showing here?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So is the curb and gutter safety thing for pedestrians, or is it function for the drive?
It's both. It's to channelize the vehicles, and then it is also to signify to a pedestrian that, I'm going over a curb now, so I'm entering a
Right.
vehicular zone. I'm
I
stepping
mean,
over a
it
curb.
definitely feels more like a street. You're crossing a small street
Right.
versus a nice wide sidewalk. I'm just wondering if there's some kind of a better way to do that. I don't know. I mean, we have seen a lot of this recently. We haven't really seen a lot of curb.
It doesn't
We've
seem
seen a
like
lot of just change in materials and things. I mean, it definitely does help the pedestrian, but it also just visually doesn't really help the cause.
Yeah.
I think, being, if it was more of this is my personal feeling, maybe we can do this when we close, but I feel like if it was more of a staff thing, then it would be more of a known, it wouldn't be just somebody kind of just rolling out there. Staff would be aware of it because they're doing it more often. It's not as much, to me, as a safety issue, but, I'd like to see a little bit more thought there.
Yeah.
And it looks like you're doing the ADA ramps down with that crossing at that, we'll call it the middle driveway out on Smallwood, and then also at the driveway in on Woodburn.
Correct.
But it doesn't look like you've got it on the one furthest west on Smallwood?
The sidewalk does not extend past, so in this zone over here and further down Smallwood going up towards Oberlin, there is no sidewalk there. There's no existing sidewalk on this side of the street.
And this is an existing curb cut, right?
This is
an
an
existing
existing curb
drive,
cut. That's
access
correct.
drive, so.
Gotcha.
Right.
So where does the ADA ramp on the right out take you if there's no ramping
So
anywhere?
there's sidewalk to the extent of so there's sidewalk from here to here, and then you can cross, but there's no sidewalk going this direction.
Right. But there's no ramp on the westernmost portion of that sidewalk, or
Here?
yeah, right there.
No, but there is, I mean, that is your egress stair and everything out of your building. So it's serving the egress out of the stair and then being able to go down towards the corner of Smallwood and Woodburn.
Right. So if you came out of the parking deck this way and we're going that direction,
Oh, yeah, okay.
So assuming development to the west continues the sidewalk and they put in ramps on theirs to that driveway,
right.
how do we make it so that there's a connecting ramp on the eastern side of that driveway?
It would it could be added at that time when that sidewalk continues down.
Wouldn't that be out of the scope of that development? Since it's the right of way in front of your property?
Technically, it's all the same parcel, so I don't know that it would technically be out of the scope of that development.
Anyway, it doesn't have much to do with our case. So.
Well, it kind of, I mean.
Yeah.
So
I just don't want to make sure we're
if we
left
are
with a
looking at the
pickle later
other,
on.
if we are looking at the other parcel, there is a arrow, there's a triangle down there on the other side of that, and there's a couple lines. Is that an egress path out of the building, between the buildings, out to the street? What is that?
Can you explain where you're talking about?
The access, the drive, the existing drive that's there now.
To the west of our project?
Yeah, it's not on that. It's not on the slide, but it is on the.
It's covered by the darker.
That triangle it's a property corner marker. So it's where the property line goes from tangent to curve. That's all that triangle is.
Is that a sidewalk? Is that a crossing across the drive aisle there? Where that dark.
No, that's a pavement hatch. There's no crossing there. We're doing some utility work where utility crosses through there. So that's just where the pavement's being cut and replaced.
I was just curious to see, if that was something where we could just go ahead and add some accessibility down that, at that, on either side of that drive aisle, towards Adams Point, but.
So you said as a condition of the rezoning, you had to maintain the amount of parking that you're taking. Is that right?
That was actually a condition, but I know it was a.
Yeah, I'm not aware if it was an actual condition, but it was a primary concern expressed during the rezoning process.
Do you have any conditions from the zoning?
I can pull them up pretty quickly. Catherine and I could.
And while you're doing that, maybe you can answer another question about parking. So how many spaces are you losing in the development where kind of the boundaries of the development, and then how many new spaces are you adding back? What's the difference of space count?
The delta is -3 at the last count.
So you're losing 3 spaces from what's there currently?
Correct.
Okay. And are there code required numbers of parking for this development?
Anymore.
So the UDO has parking maximum requirements. We no longer have parking minimum requirements.
Got it.
So if anything, there would be a maximum. As far as the zoning conditions, I actually had those up. There are essentially 4 zoning conditions as part of the rezoning of the property, one having to do with certain uses that are prohibited, one having to do with the facades of structured parking, essentially like the design of the structured parking, parapet walls, and then the last one had to do with lighting within a parking structure.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing that affects us. And then was a TIA done for this project?
Do not believe so.
And nothing that would trigger that, a need for that. Okay. Is there any sort of loading happening in that basement level parking area?
No, there will be no loading. There's an existing loading zone here that would be utilized for anything that's required for the hotel as well.
Okay.
This is sort of a back of house area for the village district itself, which would be shared with the hotel.
Okay. And is there still going to be parallel parking along Smallwood? Because there is now, right? Isn't there parallel parking along that street?
I don't believe there's any parallel parking in this area because of the left turn lane and the through lane. I don't think it extends towards the intersection of
Okay,
Smallwood.
so the intent is not to have any parallel parking along this development?
That is correct.
Okay. Kevin, I've got a question or two for you. So you said that you guys have not had a chance to review this current plan that we're looking at. I'm curious if you, because at one point I guess it was a full movement turn out of there, out of the basement level. We've got in our packet a right-in, right-out movement from that. Did you guys have the chance to even review that?
We reviewed a full access. Looking back at the second review, Casey, I know you said the prior ASR was on here somewhere, wasn't it, where I could pull that up, the second review? Sorry.
I mean, I can appreciate that everybody's reacting to conversations that are happening between the applicant and the staff. I just want to make sure we're not getting ahead of ourselves.
This is the ASR plan. Yeah, that's the ASR.
David, is this the second review plan that we have up here?
Third.
That's the third one, so the second one was full access, right?
Yes.
All right. So, and to answer your question, staff saw the full access drive, not this. Now, transportation staff had been involved with David and his design team and developer. What I was stating for earlier is that the review groups as a whole have not been able to see the plan. We've had a lot of dialogue, a lot of discussion on where it's going, things there and forth, but no, we saw full access, both onto Smallwood and back out to the drive-off.
And then as far as the full access drive on Woodburn, do you have any concerns over safety or congestion with where that driveway is located?
There are no concerns with the Woodburn Road driveway.
No, okay.
So while you're up here, can I ask you if there was a design that had a in and out access to the lower garage, would that have safety concerns or operational issues with you?
Yes.
Can you explain your reasoning there?
The proximity of those two driveways, there's a potential for rear end collisions, which there's somewhat of a history at this intersection over the past few years. Going back 7 years, I think there's been around 5. So that's one thing. The other thing is how we're controlling these movements, how we're limiting this to a full right out, how we're going to keep it from being a weaving movement to the left turn lane onto Woodburn, if you will, because that's a through right and then a left turn. And in hearing discussions prior, I agree, pedestrians. Now, one of the improvements of this site, David mentioned there's not sidewalk there now. You know, this is good, we're getting sidewalk. And it's going to meet the Cameron streetscape plan or Village District streetscape. But there needs to be thought, in my opinion, of looking at those pedestrian elements in the movements.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, and Kevin, this may be for you too, sorry. Or maybe the applicant. The landscaping along Woodburn, or I'm sorry, along Smallwood, seems to be trees, spaced pretty tightly together. Can you just describe what the tree spacing is?
Correct. So the trees along Smallwood are understory trees spaced at 20 feet on center because there are overhead power lines along Smallwood. It's different from what's on Woodburn. If you just want to compare the two, Woodburn is the standard street tree at 40 feet on center because there are no power lines there.
And is that required street trees and spacing?
Yes, that is required.
Okay. I was going to ask if there was any safety concern about views as you're making that turn out of the deck with all those trees lining
And does
the road,
does
but if that's required.
does the village district streetscape plan designate the type of tree and?
I honestly do not know the answer to that, whether they dictate type of tree or not, or whether
Certainly
they follow
for
standards.
understory, they have to limb them up to 6 feet. So that would be written in the landscape plan. Yeah. Shouldn't, if it was a DOT road, they wouldn't let them do it, but since it's not, that's correct. And shouldn't interfere with sightlines.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, hearing no additional questions, I'm sorry, do you, before we go to that, do you have anything further, any closing remarks before we close the hearing?
Public. We did.
No, staff, anything further from you? All right, great. So hearing no additional questions or presentation of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. As a reminder, this commission is tasked with deciding if, based on the evidence presented, this proposal meets the applicable standards. This decision cannot be based on the personal preference of commission members. Rather, it is based on standards and evidence. If, based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. With that, would anybody like to start conversation?
Well, I think I just want to make a couple comments about process. I think this, the way that this late stage information came in kind of sets a tough precedent for us and being able to have all of the information. And certainly we can look at it and do our best, but I certainly don't want to set a precedent that this kind of process is okay with us. And then I think the second thing I'd say is that we continue to reiterate that we would like to have short, succinct, well thought out presentations. You know, this is a volunteer board and, you know, we're all volunteering our time. And so we really appreciate succinct, well thought out, short presentations. So if we can have that in the future, that certainly would be amenable.
I have apprehensions of voting on this, given that transportation has not fully reviewed the plans that have been presented. In general, I take no exception. I believe finding support the driveway spacing on Woodburn and likely the westernmost entrance on Smallwood, but I can't vote in support of this today without transportation coming and being able to say we fully reviewed what's in front of us.
I completely agree.
Yeah, I think all of us probably agree with that.
That's the one thing I wrote down. I think we would need to be able to ask transportation staff if they've reviewed it and if they have any safety concerns. And at this point, we're not able to do that. We don't have.
I have an opinion on what the pros and cons of this scenario are versus that, but I would like to see it or hear that from the experts.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. And which I think comments related to that could affect both the western entrance on Smallwood and the one that's the right out only. So I personally don't feel comfortable approving either of those two requests today.
I agree. I think if you're potentially holding one that's a connected system, though, I will say the Woodburn Road one does seem to be fairly reasonable as it's designed now, particularly with that radius adjustment too.
The only other thing I'd say is I also am not really clear and would love transportation to continue to review the pedestrian circulation and streetscape along Smallwood to see if it can be improved.
I'll add to, I don't know that I'm fully convinced on the need for the egress, ingress, whatever it would be on Smallwood Drive.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I kind of feel like it's gratuitous, but it sounds like transportation is not interested. You know, I hear, if I understood Kevin right, that an in and out from the existing drive into the lower deck is not an option. And so in that case, there wouldn't be any way to get out of that lower deck. But I think what we're all saying is it needs more review, and I think we can probably just leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The only feedback I would give is, I think you gain a lot of additional safety by not having that access for potentially giving up parking, but I think that is a fair trade potentially.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so to me, the way the city is heading, I think losing 9 spaces of parking would be much better. If it meant not having that right out, I think that aligns much better, but that's not what's in front of us right now. So.
I think I go along with that. I think, remember that, parking is key there. I mean, and I feel for them, and I think, so I understand what they're trying to accomplish. You will pick up a couple if there is no right in and right out in that location as well. So, without studying how the deck works and what the elevation grades are, can they do something on the second and third where they don't lose those spaces, but then they can go under it? I don't know with looking at a 2D plan. But, maybe you lose just 4 on the lower, but you pick up 2, I don't know. But I think I agree with it. Having staff take another look, I think, a little bit of the heartburn that I have is that, it has gone a couple rounds of review, is what my understanding is. And so, it'd be nice to find a way to, not just this project, but all projects, to be able to kind of get this nailed down a little sooner. And I don't know what that is, but that's a little bit of heartburn for me, just because of timing. And, every project, it takes a lot of time to get through these. The Woodburn access, I think that's a no-brainer. I think it's a huge benefit. It's a huge change, which will only improve that intersection. It's very confusing right now with the stop, the white markings the way they are now. And I think just the stacking and everything, that's going to be a huge improvement. It's like, reducing from 2 to 1. I mean, it's huge, so I can get behind that easily.
I actually have a question, I think, for the applicant. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to reopen the hearing just for a second. So the packet that we had on board docs, the architectural building plans don't match the site plan. So the site plan had the 2 separate entrances on that west side, one into the lower basement parking, one into the parking that goes up the ramps. The architectural plans had 1 entrance going into both. There was 2 parking spots instead of the 3 that you've got. They're rotated 90 degrees. But at some point, it seemed like that had to have worked if it was drawn on the architectural plans. Can you speak a little bit about what necessitated the change to go from that single entrance to the 2 entrances?
I can attempt. I'm not the architect, so I'll give you my best understanding of that. Originally, the thought was that you could come in off of Smallwood and use 1 entrance here and ramp down to get into the lower level and ramp up to get up to the second level of the garage. Once that was studied further, there was too much grade for that to work.
Okay.
So that's what necessitated the entrance being further down. And again, I'm not the architect, but that's how it was explained to me.
Okay.
That's what necessitated the change.
All right, thanks for that. Unless there's any other questions for the applicant, I am going to bring the hearing back, or the matter back to the table for continued deliberation. And I agree with everything that's been said about the Woodburn entrance as well. So is there any other conversation? Catherine, we're able to vote on one of these and then continue the case, is that correct?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, the way design alternates work, those are tied to a pending in review site plan. So if they get one, it all kind of works in conjunction. So I don't know if the applicant, if they just get one, if that will satisfy their plan or not. So you might want to ask them if you want to vote on one. I don't know if you guys, it sound like you were thinking about more review time. If you want to ask them if they want to just not get a vote tonight on anything and continue it and come, so yes, you can vote separately on the different items, but I don't know practically if that would help, what that would do, because it's all tied to the site plan review.
Okay. Mr. Morris, do you want to comment on that?
Thank you all very much for your time, your comments, your deliberation. Given the commission's comments and the timing and of this particular development, we'd like to move forward tonight. We understand the implications that might have on the Smallwood intersection. It sounds like there's support for the Woodburn intersection. It's important for us to get that approval tonight and to keep this development moving forward. If that means you are not willing to support the Smallwood driveway, I believe the development team's willing to accept that at this time and would ask that you move forward with the Woodburn, approval of Woodburn intersection, if you feel comfortable doing so by itself.
Okay, and just to clarify that, you're asking not even to continue the case for these other matters, just disapprove those or not approve those and only approve the one?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So just so I'm clear too, there's 3 requests total. The third request is the Woodburn to, what's the one below there? Intersection, but there's 2 requests related to Smallwood, both related to the new driveway on Smallwood. So just so, where'd Sam go? Do you guys want, do you want to vote on those requests, or are you withdrawing those 2, or what all do you want?
Do you have a preference from?
It's up to you all. I mean,
I don't know what the technical way to do it is, because if that one right out only goes away, then there is no request needed to be made along that street.
right.
I think we would just, I mean, we can just vote on it. And I think let's just vote on this too. And we can vote on all 3 separately. And
I'm sorry, let me ask a procedural question too, at the extent of dragging this out. How does us voting on that tonight help you move forward with the development?
Because it does not require us to come back on that matter. We will, we'll withdraw, essentially, yeah, exactly. That we need to move forward based on tonight, yeah. And that we'd prefer that to move forward with the Woodburn alone, as opposed to have to come back.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, hearing that, would anybody like to make a motion?
I move to approve, I believe this is design alternate number 3 that relates to Woodburn Road as submitted to us. Actually, just really quickly before that, Kevin, specifically with Woodburn, is there kind of any outstanding staff analysis related to that could potentially be?
We'll reopen the hearing briefly for that.
Staff has no concerns with the Woodburn driveway.
Okay, thank you. So,
Thanks. Nope, bringing the matter back to the table.
so as I just said, I move to approve the design alternate number 3 related to the Woodburn Road driveway spacing and as submitted to us tonight.
Second that.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right,
Okay.
so the other two,
Yeah, and I couldn't, Sam, are you guys withdrawing those two officially, or do you want to vote on them?
We'll withdraw those two requests.
Okay, so 1 and 2 are withdrawn, so you don't have to vote on them.
okay, very good.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I believe that brings this case to a conclusion. Thank you for that. The commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with the right to such notice following adoption of the decision. All right, moving on to other parts of the agenda, we have some meeting notes to approve.
I'm sorry, I've got my son sitting in the back. Do you need my vote on those minutes? I think so.
We do at this
Yeah,
point.
okay. Yeah, that's cool.
So these are the November 3rd, 2022 minutes. If everybody's had a chance to review them, does anybody want to make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Second.
Kyle seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, those are passed. All right, so we lost Corey. We're losing Marcus. Will, are you sticking around, or you got to go too? Okay.
I do too.
All right. So we will continue the Sir Walter Raleigh Awards debrief until another meeting. I do want to give you guys just a couple quick heads up. It'll take just a couple minutes. One is that we are looking into, because attendance has been challenging, we know, we're actually looking into if we'd be able to move these meetings to a different day of the month and different time of the day. So right now, staff is figuring out what times council chambers is available, what time staff would be available for those, and we will send, once we've got that, then we'll send a survey out to the group, see if and one of those times works better than what we've already got on the calendar.
For what it's worth, for me, it's not a time and date issue. It goes to the point of Adam's comment during the meeting of how we move through the presentations in a more focused way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the time, I doubt that time and date is an issue, but it's good enough to try. And I appreciate you doing that.
Very good. And then the other thing is we're coming up on the season where we are going to change the chair and vice chair.
I nominate Chris.
Season.
So yeah, it is the season. So I think it's either our procedures or bylaws. I think it's the procedure. No, I'm sorry. I think it's the bylaws that said you should get a nominating committee together for that. Since things have changed, since those were written, and we're not allowed to really communicate outside of this meeting with each other, I have offered to take on that role of asking if anybody else would be interested in taking on chair and vice chair. So we won't take a vote until probably the second January meeting or the first February meeting. But I'll be reaching out to everybody to see if they would like to be included in those considerations, those nominations and elections. And then next meeting, we've got a presentation from the NC State Walkable Midtown presentation. And then we've also got Tina Govan coming back, right, to give her presentation, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that right, Casey?
Yes, both Tina and NC State are planning to come and present.
Okay, awesome. So try to make it back for that. I think it's going to be a really interesting presentation to see the work that they've put in it so far. And we have generously donated a bunch of money. So it'd be nice to show them support. And Casey, I believe I heard you say earlier that you've also invited other staff or other members from boards and commissions to be part of that. And we'll be up in the third floor. So hopefully we get great participation. All right, I think that's all we've got for tonight then. Anything else from the rest of the commission? All right, very good. With that, we will call the meeting adjourned. Have a great night.